Having gay parents must be tough. You'd either end up with double the usual share of dad jokes or stuck in a never-ending cycle of being told, "Go ask your mom." An Irishman steps into a pub, orders 2 shots, drinks them both, and departs. The following day he returns, orders the same, finishes them, and leaves. This continues regularly until one day the bartender asks, "Why do you always order exactly 2 shots?" The Irishman explains, "Well, my brother and I used to go out drinking every evening, but he moved far away, so now I order 1 drink for me and 1 for him." Things carry on like this until one day the Irishman comes in and orders just 1 shot. Concerned, the bartender asks, "Why only 1? Did something happen to your brother?" The Irishman replies, "Oh no, my brother's fine. I just stopped drinking." Want to make holy water? Simple. Just boil the hell out of it. My friend gave me an elephant to keep in my room. I said thanks, and she replied, "Don't mention it." A man entered a bar, took a seat, and ordered a beer. While enjoying his drink, he heard a calming voice say, "Nice tie." He looked around and realized the bar was empty, apart from himself and the bartender standing at the other end. A few sips later, the voice said, "Lovely shirt." Feeling puzzled, the man called the bartender over and said, "I think I'm losing it. I keep hearing these voices complimenting me, but there's no one here." The bartender replied, "It's the peanuts." "Excuse me," said the man. "You heard right," said the bartender. "The peanuts are complimentary." An elderly man lay on his deathbed with his wife sitting nearby. They had 3 children, but the youngest, Steve, never resembled the older 2, sparking years of doubt. Looking at his wife, he asked, "Darling, it doesn't matter anymore, but I need to know, is Steve my son?" Smiling, his wife assured him, "I promise you, Steve is your son." Relieved, the old man passed away peacefully. Then his wife muttered to herself, "Thank goodness he didn't ask about the first 2. There's this guy named Dave who absolutely dreads visiting the doctor. Luckily, his brother Henry is a veterinarian. Whenever Dave feels unwell, he tells Henry, and Henry says, "I'm not a doctor, but here's what I do and the medications I'd use." One day, Dave breaks his leg and calls Henry to explain what happened. Henry is silent for a moment before saying, "Dave, I've got some bad news." A new priest was so nervous during his first Mass that he could barely speak. Afterward, he asked the Monsignor for feedback. The Monsignor advised, "When I get nervous on the pulpit, I keep a glass of vodka next to my water glass. If I feel anxious, I take a small sip." The next Sunday, the priest followed the advice. When he became uneasy during the sermon, he took a drink and started speaking confidently. After Mass, he found a note on his door that read, 1. Sip the vodka. Don't chug it. 2. There are 10 commandments, not 12. 3. There are 12 disciples, not 10. 4. Jesus was consecrated, not constipated. 5. Jacob wagered his donkey. He didn't bet his A's. 6. We do not refer to Jesus Christ as the late JC7. The Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are not called Daddy, Jr., and the Spook. 8. David killed Goliath. He didn't beat the seed out of him. 9. When David was struck by a rock and fell off his donkey, don't say he was stoned off his A's. 10. We don't call the cross the big T. 11. When Jesus broke the bread at the Last Supper, he said, "Take this and eat. It is my body." He didn't say, "Eat me." 12. The Virgin Mary isn't referred to as Mary with the cherry. 13. Grace before meals isn't. Rub-a-dub-dub, thanks for the grub. Yeah, God. 14. Next Sunday, there will be a taffy pulling contest at St. Peter's, not a Peter pulling contest at St. Taffy's. How do you approach the unthinkable? With an iceberg. Driving along the road, I noticed a hitchhiker and, feeling generous, decided to offer him a ride. After he got in and we started driving, he expressed his gratitude, but then asked, "Aren't you worried I might be a serial killer or something?" I laughed, looked at him, and said, "Well, the odds of us both being serial killers are pretty slim, don't you think?" What's the name of a magical dog? A labracadabra. That joke always makes me laugh whenever it comes to mind. I couldn't figure out why the ball kept getting bigger, and then it hit me. An old pastor, a respected academic, a wealthy businessman, and a young boy were on a small airplane. The engine fails, and the pilot announces, "We're going down, but there are only 4 parachutes. One of us has to stay, but it won't be me." He grabs a parachute and jumps. The academic stands up and declares, "I'm too intelligent to die." He grabs one and leaps out. Seeing this, the businessman says, "I'm too wealthy to die." He takes another parachute and jumps. The pastor turns to the boy and says, "I've had a long life, but you're still young. Take the last parachute and save yourself." The boy responds, "Thank you, sir, but we can both survive." Puzzled, the pastor asks, "What do you mean? There's only one parachute left." The boy smiles and says, "Before the academic jumped, he grabbed my backpack." How can you distinguish between an electrician and a chemist? Ask them to say the word unionized. What do you call a Frenchman wearing sandals? Philippe Philop. A police officer stops a semi-truck and asks for the usual license and registration. Hearing odd noises coming from the trailer, he decides to investigate. Inside, he discovers 50 penguins. "Why do you have 50 penguins in your truck?" the officer asks. The driver replies, "They're my friends and we like to travel together in the truck." The officer shakes his head and says, "You can't just keep 50 penguins. You need to take them to the zoo." The driver agrees and drives off. The next day, the same officer stops the truck again and hears the same noises. He checks and finds the same 50 penguins. Frustrated, he says, "I thought I told you to take these penguins to the zoo yesterday." The driver responds, "I did take them to the zoo. They loved it. Today, we're heading to the beach.